House Republicans scrambling now to pick their next speaker. House Judiciary Chairman Jim Jordan now has a challenger, Congressman Austin Scott. This coming after Steve Scalise dropped out because he wasn't able to secure the votes needed to become Speaker. Joining us now is Henrietta Treyz, Veda Partners Managing Partner and Director of Economic Policy Research. So Henrietta, Scalise out, withdrew from the contest. Walk us through what happens next.
Well, as we speak right now, the House Republican Conference is going into an internal meeting to see if they can't take votes and choose between their two remaining candidates, as you just mentioned, Scott and Jordan. My opinion was the same today as it has been since November of last year after the midterms. I don't see how Jim Jordan gets the votes from the moderate wing of the Republican Party to get to the 217 votes that they have. There is some optimism. Members of both parties have been alerted that votes could happen through the weekend, but it looks like a heavy lift to me. And again, I don't see how Jim Jordan gets 217 votes. So this could easily be on the table for us next week and the week after. We really need a piece of major legislation to need urgent House action. Otherwise, you're just seeing this posturing and internal Republican infighting that really has been present for years now, bubbling over with this latest speaker's drama.
Henrietta, I have sort of a dumb question for you. What does the Speaker of the House do? And if there is legislation that needs to be approved next week or the week after, does a Speaker of the House need to be in place in order for that to get passed?
Not a dumb question at all. In fact, the Speaker Pro Tempore, which is a position that was created only in the wake of some relatively near-term events historically, is Patrick McHenry. He's there and he's been meeting with the House parliamentarian, who's basically the referee, to figure out how exhaustive his authority might actually be. According to the rules right now, all he's really supposed to be able to do is convene the vote for the next Speaker of the House. But obviously now we're engaging in a war. Israel is at war. We need aid to Ukraine. We need funding for the U.S.-Mexico border and aid to Taiwan. All of those are pressing issues that the White House is asking for legislation on as early as next week. The Senate is going to return on Monday night. And by Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, there could be a bill that the House needs to vote on that, by the way, many members of the House want to vote on. And we don't even know if the Speaker Pro Tempore is legally allowed to bring that bill to the floor. So it's a really smart question and one that lawmakers have been studying with the parliamentarian since McCarthy got ousted. My opinion is that the longer this drags on, the more authority the Speaker Pro Tempore will be authorized. One of the things that we like to say in D.C. is, remember, these are the players in the game, these congressmen, but they're also the referees. So when they need to change the rules, they do. And the more dysfunctional D.C. gets, the longer the Republican infighting flows and we remain without a speaker. My forecast is that the more power they are going to allot to the Speaker Pro Tempore position and effectively create precedent that puts Patrick McHenry effectively in the speaker's seat, which is, I think, maybe the path of least resistance at this point.
What about also, Henrietta, this idea that maybe there's a deal with Democrats, right? There's a bipartisan deal to get a Republican speaker, or would you say, listen, forget it at a time when every single Democrat voted to give McCarthy a boot? What do you think? Any possibility of a bipartisan deal here?
I don't think that that's realistic. I think the scenario I just laid out, where we just grant more and more power to the Speaker Pro Tempore, is more politically viable. What you're asking for, and you're not alone, many people are asking this question, is for a handful of Republicans to cross the aisle and vote for Hakeem Jeffries, the Democratic leader who consistently secures every single vote from the House Democratic caucus, or for a handful of Democrats to cross the aisle and vote for a Republican. Now, some of the Republican candidates that are up for Speaker did not vote to approve Biden as the president. I would consider it pretty unlikely that they acknowledge that that's a good person to lead the chamber. There's just some really basic components that will make it impossible for any Democrat to cross the aisle. And then if any Republican crosses the aisle, that's it. They've effectively just lost the whole RNC backing. Their fundraising will get shut down. They could be stripped of their committee positions. A Speaker Jeffries might try to reappropriate them and put them at leadership in certain committees if he were Speaker. But crossing the aisle is stripping you effectively of the entire party apparatus. And I think that that's really important to relay, because that's your fundraising, that's your access to emails, that's your donor list, that's your partners who will come and make your fundraiser more appealing. It's a whole party-wide apparatus, which is why, for instance, a third-party candidate doesn't win in the United States. They don't have the backing of the apparatus, and that's what crossing the aisle to vote for Speaker from another party would do. It's effectively admitting that you don't want to run for re-election again, because you'll have a hard time getting re-elected.
So unlikely then, in a word. Henrietta, put this all together for us, especially from an economic and markets perspective. What do people need to be watching here? Why does it matter in the sort of bigger picture here?
Well, I think the biggest market-moving event is going to be a government shutdown. That's 5 weeks away. So we have a while before that. Right now, you're just following along with this because it's fun for you and you're into politics. The market ramifications from a stock-specific basis are not there yet because the government is funded through November 17th. If you want to get very high-minded, you can turn to the potential for credit ratings agencies to downgrade the United States the way that they have in the last couple of weeks, and certainly they did in 2011 when we got the Budget Control Act and we're about to default on our debt. So there's a big overarching macro theme from a downgrade perspective that you could play right now, and that's mostly impacting treasuries or bonds. But from a sector-specific or stock-specific reference point, you're really waiting for either a massive funding bill to come through, which would be huge for aerospace and defense stocks, as we provide aid to Israel, Ukraine, Taiwan, and the U.S.-Mexico border, whether that's for surveillance or detaining prisoners on the southern border or sending more missiles and artillery over to Israel or to Ukraine. Those are all ways to play in the next probably 2 weeks. We'll see a spending bill pass in the House and Senate that provides aid to Israel. But then after that, you're worried about a government shutdown. And when we get to a government shutdown, then what do you start to see? New SNAP recipients can't be put online. So you have shifts in the agriculture space. You have problems at airlines because FAA employees historically have not shown up to work because they're not being paid, and that leads to stop flight orders at places like LaGuardia, for instance, back in 2018. But that's a November 17th scenario, and we'll walk through that when we get there. It's too early to say. My expectation is that parts of the government shut down, but maybe not all of it, and that's mostly because we would fund defense. So in the immediate term, the defense and aerospace sector is where you pay attention.
Ooh, a lot of balls in the air, indeed. Henrietta, thank you so much. Really helpful insight on this whole situation. Henrietta Treyz is Veda Partners Managing Partner and Director of Economic Policy Research. Thanks again.